Well, good morning again, and thank you to the organizers for this wonderful conference. So the topic is musical life in Baghdad from about 1910 to 1950, changing attitudes towards Iraqi Jewish women as performers and participants. I think a lot of what you've already heard may overlap, so anyway, here we go. During the first half of the 20th century, notions of shame and respectability governed the extent of a woman's participation in music as performer, listener, in private or in public. Salima Pasha Murad and Masuda al-Bombayliyi, Masuda the Bombayite, were both iconic musical figures, two professional Jewish women musicians in a musical world dominated by men. Performing in the first half of the 20th century, they overlapped during approximately the 1930s, both in Baghdad, but inhabiting very different musical and social spheres. This paper considers their careers, the degree of respectability or shame attached to their profession, their audiences, and changing attitudes to women as performers, or their presence and participation as audience. Salima Pasha, later Salima Murad, was the doyenne of female singers in the public domain in all Iraq, not just in Baghdad. Writing about women singers, the late Yahaskel Kocaman, author and musicologist, says, "At the time, it was considered shameful for a woman to sing in public, so that no respectable family would allow their daughter to become a professional singer. Thus, a situation existed whereby women singers and dancers were recruited from local brothels from among those who had musical talent. Despite this, Salima Murad was loved and respected. She was asked to sing at numerous private parties where she earned a high fee. Salima was invited to perform for the Prime Minister, Nuri Said. She performed at nightclubs and on Baghdad radio. Her songs were composed exclusively for her by leading composer-musicians of the day." In stark contrast, Masuda al-Bombayliyi was a Takaka, plural is Takakat, a women's profession associated primarily with music in the private domestic sphere. Takakat initially performed exclusively for women. The profession was generally hereditary and associated mainly with the pre-wedding henna night. Takaka performed in Baghdad since at least the 18th century, and apparently the profession was sanctioned by the rabbinate, perhaps because the Takaka was initially performed only for women and was a mature woman past childbearing age. She was an indispensable feature of the henna ceremony, and according to one writer, also at the Sheba Brachot, the 7 blessings, or banquets for 7 days of festivities following a wedding. The Takaka sang, accompanying herself on the naqara, which you see here, a small pair of tunable drums, which she hit with 2 sticks. The name of her profession relates to the hitting or beating dak of the drums. The Takaka led her group, a small chorus of 2, 3 or more women, called the Radadat, who sang the refrains, each playing a large tambourine or daf. Their unique repertoire was for the khadba, that's the dyeing with henna, or jalwa, the sight or showing ceremony, when henna was applied to the bride-to-be's fingers. From the 20th century, it became customary for the groom-to-be and his family to take part. The Takaka sang a standard repertoire of songs associated with the occasion, mostly in the Baghdad Judeo-Arabic dialect, often improvising the texts to suit the occasion and praise those present. Those honored would hopefully respond, throwing money to the group to augment their modest earnings from the host. The entire repertoire is characterized by a single rhythmic mode. Ugrug, also known as Georgina. I use the term Ugrug because this is what my informants have always said to me. Today it is generally known as Georgina. A quintessentially Iraqi rhythm, not generally known in other Arab countries. In fact, from my experience during fieldwork in Israel in the 90s, Even the most accomplished Egyptian musicians would leave the stage when Iraqi musicians played songs in this rhythm. So for those of you who read music, that's what it looks like, and it sounds dum, tak, tak, dum, tak, dum, tak, tak, dum, tak, dum, tak, tak, dum, tak. And the Takaka's mnemonic for that rhythm was starting on the upbeat. نقار بالدقا قوبة بالشق غنوا على البيضة يا لابس الوردي, one of their songs. So Masuda al-Bambayli was the most famous Takaka in Baghdad. Her family, originally from Amara, emigrated to Bombay, India, around the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. Most of the family remained in Bombay, but Masuda went to Baghdad to marry and gained fame there as a Takaka. At least 2 recordings of Masuda al-Bambayli's group exist from the 1930s. Yadar praises the occasion and those present. As customary, recordings start by introducing the performer or performers. Here they're called Dgagat, and you'll hear lots of drums. Many Takaka songs were light-hearted and humorous, and the highlight of the evening was Afaki, Bravo, an acerbic text sung as though by one mother, the groom's, to the other, her rival, the bride's mother, in the typical Ugrug or Georgina rhythm, and in the melodic mode of Bayat. So, bravo to you on the trick you've played. Wanat abdu wa nashqetu, and I've tired myself and labeled على الحاضر أخذتينه. And again, it's in the same rhythm. So, عفاكي عفاكي على فندل عملتينه وانا تعبت وانا شقيت على الحاضر أخذتينه, etc. The verses have changed over time, but the refrain is standard. I've not come across a Takaka recording of this song in Baghdad, but there are a number of recordings of Afaki made in Baghdad by famous Muslim and Jewish male singers, as we heard earlier, reciters or vocalists of Iraqi maqam, the art music tradition where the vocalist is known as the Qari maqam. So Rashid al-Qundarchi's recording of Afaki is a classic. And Afaki may be sung at the end of an Iraqi maqam performance as a pasta, a metrical song. It retains the Baghdad Judeo-Arabic dialect, but its character is transformed by the more serious melodic mode of Sabah and the 6-beat Sangin Samai rhythm. So here we have a highly respected male Muslim singer performing a song associated with a modest Jewish women's tradition and in the Judeo-Arabic dialect of Baghdad. He's accompanied by the Chalghi instrumental ensemble of 4 players, all of whom were Jewish, and the recording is prefaced with Rashid Effendi Qundarchi, Effendi being a title of respect. quite a different sound from the Takaka's presentation. At the henna evening, the Takaka and her group sometimes continued their program for another 2 or 3 hours, though rarely after midnight, with songs of their choice, bastat, folkloric songs, and popular songs of the day, even such as those of Salima Murad. Some Takakat even sang from the Iraqi maqam repertoire, meaning from the art music tradition. But this aspect of Takaka entertainment, the Takaka night, became rarer after the 1930s, with competition from nightclub artists who would perform after midnight. Takakat sometimes played at Muslim homes for women's parties, such as celebrations preceding a wedding or for the birth of a son. Now, the Takaka also appeared as both participant and performer at the pilgrimage or ziyarah to holy tombs in Iraq, particularly during the festival of Shavuot, Feast of Weeks. We have an account from over a century ago when Yosef ben Azra Yehuda was leader of the Jewish community at Al-Kufl, near Al-Halla, and overseer of the tomb of Ezekiel, the prophet, at Al-Kufl. His daughter, Flora Kiflawi, recalled, "Each evening after prayers, there would be performances by musicians with drums and cymbals. The musicians had arrived together with the pilgrims before the festival. Among them was a famous drummer by the name of Masuda al-Bombayliya, whose family came from Bombay in India. She appeared every night with a band of 3 or 4 Jewish women. They would sit in the courtyard and play, with pilgrims gathered around. Masuda would sing for the pilgrims, for the children, or for those who sought a blessing, and the listeners would toss money to her. Despite performing with men and women present, the Takaka, a professional woman entertainer, was always considered respectable." Generally speaking, however, Baghdad in the first half of the 20th century was no place for any decent woman to perform in public. Nevertheless, a number of women singers were acknowledged and respected as musical experts, with numerous recordings to their credit. Salima Pasha performed every night at the Jawahari nightclub in Baghdad to an exclusively male audience. Salima would appear for the last half hour when she danced and sang, accompanied by the resident musicians. Her musicians included the Syrian oud player Saliba al-Khatrib, the only non-Jewish oud player in Baghdad at the time, and Abdu Saada, the acclaimed Jewish singer originally from Syria. He performed as solo vocalist at the Jawahari nightclub, where he also played duff and sang as part of the chorus for Salima Murad's program. Salima was the most renowned female singer of modern song. The term modern was coined by Kojaman to describe the song tradition that developed in the 2 decades following World War I, in distinction to the older style of maqam music. Some call Salima the Iraqi Kulthum. Salima also sang Abuliya, an unmetered genre, and some maqam. In addition to her appearances at nightclubs and her weekly program on Baghdad radio since 1936, Salima was invited to perform at domestic functions, including henna evenings, arriving after midnight and following her nightclub performance. Sorry, I'm really thirsty, but I'll carry on. Most of her repertoire comprised bastat, metrical songs, in the modern style, 90% of which were composed by the composer-violinist Salih al-Kuwaiti, who you see standing in the middle, and who, with his brother Dawood al-Kuwaiti, as we've heard, composed for Salima during most of the 1930s. Salih had been asked to form Baghdad Radio's official music ensemble, Al-Furqat al-Idhaa, when it started in 1936. It was this ensemble that also accompanied Salima on her weekly radio program, after which she would go on to appear at the nightclub. The Al-Kuwaiti songs, as we've heard, captured the essence of Iraqi music in subject matter, and particularly in their use of the ugrug or Georgina rhythm. Thank you so much, everyone. It was very nice of you. Thank you. In Ala Shawati Dijla, along the shores of the Tigris, we have invoked images of nature and romance and the Tigris River that flows through Baghdad. The rhythmic mode here is the 6-beat Sangin Samai, also a typically Iraqi rhythm. This recording on the Sodwa label is prefaced with the name of the label, followed by Sit Salima Pasha, Sit or Lady, being a title of respect. Sorry, we'll move on. These compositions are valued, and the Arabic texts and music notation appear in printed folkloric collections of Iraqi songs, such as by Hilmi. In some instances, singer and composer are acknowledged. In this case, neither the name of the singer nor composer is mentioned, and anyway, at the time, I understand that names of Jewish composers were suppressed completely, but more recently, Jewish composers have been acknowledged and valued in Iraq. In 1938, the 18-year-old Salima Nur, who later emigrated to Israel, presented Salima Pasha with his song composition, Ayyuha Saqi, the 12th century Muwashah girdle poem, which Al-Nur had studied at school. The composition appealed to Salima and was recorded in Baghdad. It is in the most Iraqi of rhythms, the 10-beat ugrug. And this is it. Again, it is valued as a song, but neither the composer nor singer is acknowledged in the printed version. From 1939 to 1944, Salima's personal composer was Salim Daoud, a blind musician, brilliant oud player, violinist, and singer. He was not allowed to compose for anyone else at the time. Salim Daoud was a famous exponent of the modern style and composed many songs for Salima. Unfortunately, none were recorded. While both Salima Murad and the Takaka group may have been invited to play at the same event, it is unlikely they would have appeared during the same part of the evening's entertainment. And what of their audiences? Women's experience of live music performance was mainly domestic and initially segregated. Women listened to domestic performances of Iraqi maqam and chalghi from the gallery above the central courtyard. Even larger buildings like schools were constructed similarly, so that at wedding celebrations, for example, at the Alliance School, musicians and men sat downstairs in the open courtyard and all the women were upstairs all around. The houses in Iraq are open, they sit upstairs all around. That's how it was. During the 1940s, attitudes became more relaxed, with men allowed in the same room as women during the Takaka henna ceremony, and women sitting in the same space as men for domestic performances by chalghi and nightclub artists. Nevertheless, no girl from a respectable family could aspire to become a professional singer, instrumentalist, or dancer. Even at home, no decent woman would sing in the company of men. Yet it was acceptable for a woman to sing while putting a child to sleep, not only lullabies, but popular songs too, even with a man present and without fear of being embarrassed or humiliated. In public spaces, respectable women were excluded from attending music performances, whether of Iraqi maqam at coffee houses or at men-only nightclubs offering women singers and dancers as entertainment. But as we heard yesterday, with the advent of cinema in Baghdad from the early 1930s, women could now participate with men in the public enjoyment of American, Egyptian, and even homegrown musicals. Egyptian and Western trends further modernized and relaxed attitudes towards women participating in music and dance, and it became acceptable for adult women to go ballroom dancing at special events in hotels, for example, on Christmas and New Year's Eve as couples. In January, on New Year's Eve, we were Jews and Christians together. There were some Arabs with their faces veiled. We used to dress in elegant clothes. It didn't bother us. So we used to walk in heavy rain with a coat. We used to go from club to club. Yes, the Jews too used to go in fancy dress for Christmas. It was really beautiful, and we used to dance. By the late 1940s, to conclude, women participated more openly in a number of musical activities which earlier would have been taboo. However, one casualty was the modest Takaka. Now outmoded, she was replaced at henna evenings by 78 RPMs records of tangos and foxtrots to which men and women danced together. Thank you. Thank you.